Hi everyone, it's Joe here from Lawn Solutions Australia and welcome to this episode of Turf Talk, where today I'm joined by Jyri Kaapro, and Jyri is the Senior Development Specialist at Envu. Jyri, how you going?
Good, thanks Joe.
So, Envu. So it hasn't been a name that's been in the industry a long time. Why don't you tell us a little bit about who Envu is and what Envu does?
So Envu came about last year, October 22, when Bayer sold off a division called Environmental Science.
Right.
So environmental science includes turf, ornamentals and a few other things.
Yep.
So that was bought by a private equity company out of London,
Yep.
and they created a new company called Envu. So it was a global sale. Everyone who was in environmental science in Bayer around the world are now in a new company called Envu.
Called Envu, right. Very, very interesting. So everyone would have definitely heard of Bayer. So Envu, it's just an ongoing thing from Bayer, essentially.
It's an ongoing thing, but we are now independent. So while we've still got access to the Bayer pipeline, we've now, being independent, got the opportunity to talk to third parties about other things that we might be able to bring in the business.
And what's your role at Envu? What do you get into day to day?
So I'm on the technical side of things. So it's trial work, technical support for the sales guys and for customers.
Yep.
But the main role is doing trials, getting trial data to support the registration of new products in turf and a few of the other markets.
So turf and ornamental, is that sort of your two main?
Turf and ornamental is sort of one. We sort of group that as one part of the business. And then we've got another part of the business called vegetation management.
Okay, yeah.
So I do a fair bit with woody weed control, forestry, weed control in industrial areas like railway lines, electricity substations.
So how much of your role is turf dedicated then?
At the moment it's probably 50-50.
Yep.
Until we started the vegetation management business, it was sort of 95 turf, but it's sort of a bit of a split now at the moment.
And how much of it is turf farms, or is it more in golf and sports turf for you?
It is really at the sports turf end of things. So a lot of time spent on golf courses, footy fields, that kind of thing.
It's quite an interesting career that you've had in the turf industry. I said I recognised you before from the old Turfcraft magazines. I used to see your photo on your article in Turfcraft. But how did you get into what you're doing now? What sparked you? Was research always something you were interested in, or the science side of things, or did that develop over time?
I think probably like most things, it just happened by accident. So I completed my bachelor's degree up at University of New England in Armidale. Ended up working in an agricultural soil testing laboratory in country New South Wales. So we were doing soil, water, plant tissue testing kind of stuff. And then needed to make a move away from there. And there was, a long time ago, an organisation called the Australian Turfgrass Research Institute.
Yes.
And they advertised a position for a laboratory manager, which was my role in this agricultural business. And I went for the job. Didn't get it. 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from the boss at ATRI, at the Turf Research Institute, and said, "We've got another position that's come up. Would you like it?" So, and I was working in development, so I was doing trial work for companies and so forth.
So where was ATRI based then?
So ATRI was based at Concord West.
Okay, yeah. And what did you study at the university? Was it soil science that you were...
No, I studied natural resource management at Armidale. I always, my passion, I guess, at that stage was plants, wildlife, the bush. So I was hoping, maybe a career in something like national parks or environmental conservation. And then for whatever reasons, ended up in this soil testing laboratory job and then ended up in turf. And once I got into turf, of course, it was totally different to what I'd studied. I ended up doing some study at Sydney University with Peter Martin and a heap of other people to get some turf knowledge.
So how long have you been in the industry now then, we say?
So I started at ATRI in the early 1990s.
Yeah. Is that 30 years?
It would be. It would
30
be.
years in the turf industry. And what have been some of the big projects you've been involved with over the way? Obviously, you work with Bayer. It was dedicated primarily to turf with Bayer too, wasn't it?
Yep.
So what are some of the big things you've been involved with? Has it mainly been just new product registration over the years, or?
On the company side of things, yeah. So obviously with ATRI, we did a lot of more independent sort of research projects.
Yeah.
We ran a annual research seminar, a lot of publications. So there was all that kind of thing we put together. And then once got in the company, it has been really product development. So probably nearly every product that we sell and I've been involved with in the development, and some of the ones that I developed 20 years ago, we probably don't sell anymore. They've now long gone and been replaced by other things.
So what do you look for when you're trying to get a new product registered? So let's say it's a new product that you want to test out for turf. What kind of things are you testing and what kind of things are you looking out for?
It really starts with the end user and seeing what kind of problems are out there and what they're struggling to control. Whether that's weeds, diseases, insects, and then seeing what we've got available that might fit to manage that problem. If there's a lot of options for something, there's perhaps no need for another product to do the same thing as that's been quite successfully done at the moment with current products. But if there is something that people are struggling with, then let's see what's available that we might be able to work on and develop into that situation.
So where does the actual development of the product itself happen? Does that happen at all in Australia, does it? Or
we really do the final bit of the field work. So all the early work is done in laboratories, in Europe, in America, and the initial screening work, which might be in glass houses, that kind of thing happens over there. And then once they've sort of worked things out a bit, then it comes to us for that final part of the registration.
And you put in the field, you make sure it doesn't harm the turf, it doesn't burn, there's no long-term issues and that sort of thing.
Most of that's already been done, especially our market's been quite similar to the USA. That they've done a lot of that testing. So it's just really getting that local data for our own registrations. I mean, we do have some of our own unique pests which they don't have overseas, and weeds and so forth. So we certainly need to look at those as well.
And let's take one more of the well-known products that have come. I think it's come out of the Envu Bayer program is Ronstar. Ronstar. So Ronstar, for those that don't know, is a pre-emergent herbicide. It's got the active in it oxidizon, which is probably more commonly known in the turf market now through products like Oxifert and Oxipro. So were you involved initially with Ronstar?
Ronstar is one of those products that was way, way before my time.
Is it been around a while?
I'm not sure how far it goes back, but it goes back many, many decades when it was first discovered. So it's quite amazing that it's still out there, and people are still finding value in it because it has been around for a long time. I've been involved with some extension of the label, some further work, but the initial work was a long time before me.
I didn't know that, right. So how long's the process now? Let's say you identify a need for a product in the market. Let's say there's a weed that people can't control or having trouble with. Envu decide, hey, we're going to fix this problem. What kind of timeline are we looking to develop a product like that and then go through trials and eventually bring it to market?
So if it's an active ingredient that's already used in Australia in, say, agriculture or horticulture, we might do 3 years worth of field trials, then submit for registration, which could take 12 months, 18 months.
Right.
If it's an active ingredient that's not registered in Australia, then we've still got the same amount of trial work, but that APVMA process, being a new active ingredient, will stretch into 2-3 years. Right, depending on how things go. So
we could be 5 to 10 years before something actually happens. And I haven't had a lot to do with the APVMA, and I imagine you've had quite a lot to do with the APVMA. Is it a difficult thing in turf grass or in our industry to get products registered? I'd imagine like medicinal, pharmaceutical stuff would be very, very difficult because we're talking about human bodies. But in the turf industry, is it a frustratingly long process to get stuff sorted?
It's certainly frustrating, and there have been times when it's been taken quite a while, and other times it's been a bit more speedy. It really depends on the product, the use situation, because obviously dealing with turf, we're much more in an urban environment than broad acre agricultural situation. So you've got a lot of different things that they have to consider in terms of exposure and surrounding properties and all those kinds of things.
So what do you do day to day now? So you You conduct field trial work. Are you at a different site conducting trials like every second day or every second week, or is there lab based stuff for you still now? Is it or?
Not really. No, not laboratory work is pretty limited. Some glasshouse work or greenhouse work, but yeah, it's really being out in the field at different sites, looking at different things.
And where do you see all this going? So we interviewed Simon Hutton recently, who's a turf producer from the UK, and what they're allowed to spray on their turf compared to what we're allowed to spray on our turf is chalk and cheese. They virtually, I got a shock how little they can actually use. What do you see happening in the Australian turf industry with registrations for products on turf? Do you see that getting a lot stricter over the next little period of time, or do you still think we're okay in that regard?
It's an interesting question which we don't know the answer to, but I guess agriculture being very important in Australia as a trade, economically being so important that that we need products to manage wheat and cotton and all those horticultural crops. So you think that products will stay around, and hopefully they'll be still available in turf. There'll certainly be some changes. I think there'll be a lot more biological products come in.
Yep.
Inverted quotes, natural products, but plant extracts and other things. So I think we'll see a lot more of that. The development of synthetic chemistry is extremely expensive. We're in the hundreds of millions of dollars for a new molecule.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And the lead time is getting longer. So then by the time patent runs out, if the company hasn't made their money back, then they've lost money. So, it's been 30 years since we had a new mode of action herbicide developed around the world. So,
oh, really? So because of that reason?
Yeah. So, it's a really expensive process, and companies are taking a risk in that. Yeah. Allocating funds to develop something, which then may at the last minute not get registered. Yeah. So
it's a massive punt for companies to do this, right? And so when you said before there's more biological, was that the right word? Biological-based products. So that's things that got natural derivatives. It's totally developed naturally. Like what do you mean exactly by that?
Well, it could be bacteria, could be a fungi for disease control, for insect control, even weed control, various essential oils out of plants that have got herbicide properties. They may form the basis. There'll obviously have to be formulation work to create something that's going to be usable, stable in a container, have a shelf life. There's a lot of work that will need to be done.
There's actually so much to think about when you look at it. Do you look at that sort of stuff, like the stability of a product and how long it can sit in the shelf? Was that part of your role?
No, that's done by the chemists. So, and, we've got a formulation team in the USA that work all the time on formulations. Things like stability, different surfactants, buffers, wetting agents, whatever that goes into those products.
Yeah. So what's without giving away too many secrets, what's in the pipeline now for Envu? Is there any exciting product releases on the horizon that you can delve into now?
Our turf product development at the moment is in early stages with our products. So we're at the first stage of that 2-3 year cycle of field trials. Yep. And then the registration process. So, we're probably 4 years away from some of those products coming to the market. But we're talking to a lot of other companies about what they have and what might be available. And, it's quite possible that we won't be just a chemical company. There'll be other things which will fit in as well, and they may or may not need APVMA registration. That could be something totally different. So our parent company is certainly looking to expand us with acquisitions of other technologies.
What's the focus now for you, though? Is there more effort put into say weed control as opposed to anything else? Is that the paramount one for you when it comes to turf?
I think weed control is it's pretty significant at the moment because of the massive herbicide resistance issues we've got.
Yes,
and we've seen that in agriculture with things like annual ryegrass resistance to so many different modes of action, and now with things like POA, winter grass, we've got massive resistance problems. So, weed control is certainly one of the big ones.
So we were just talking about this earlier today. Is the resistance that POA has got now against a lot of different herbicides out there? It's proving to be a really difficult. POA's winter grass, for those that don't know, POA annua. It's proving to be a really difficult weed to control. So if you have a product now that gets used to control POA and you're developing resistance, how do you change that? Like, what's the process look like then to try and? Because I'd imagine there'd be a lot of different types of POA and that develop a lot of different types of resistance. Where do you even start when you're trying to fix a problem like that?
Yeah, no, exactly. So we are certainly hanging out for new mode of action herbicides, which I think we'll see in a few years' time coming onto the market, and that'll help. But then we risked, if we overuse those, of developing resistance to those. So we need good resistance management strategies.
Yeah.
So tank mixing of different modes of action is probably the number one.
Yeah.
Do not go and spray out one mode of action. Tank mix different herbicides. The use of pre and post-emergent herbicides is important. If you're in a situation where you can use non-selectives, so if your turf goes dormant enough, or if you can tolerate some of the damage, some of the non-selectives can be a different mode of action.
Yeah.
So
mix up your program, mix up your mode of actions, use both pre and post, and don't be too consistent with anything. Is that basically?
No, that's right. If you're on a good thing, don't stick to it.
Yeah.
That's really what it's telling you. If something's working and you just keep on doing what's working for you, you know what's going to happen down the track. You're going to have resistance, and it's not going to work. And that's what we saw. We can take the sulfonal urea herbicides, the monuments, the tributes, the destinies. That family of herbicides, they were used for POA initially because they were so good. So we use them, and now, whoa, they're not working anymore because we didn't have a good resistance management strategy from the start. And that's really what has, if a new herbicide mode of action comes along that works well, we need a good resistance management strategy from day one to make sure that herbicide keeps working down the track.
Is the same thing happening across all your sectors, or is POA, obviously what we see with POA is a massive problem in turf production, and resistance is a massive problem. You see that obviously with a lot of annual ryegrasses and that sort of stuff in other cropping. Is it similar, like to what we see in turf?
POA, it's very similar with weeds.
Yeah.
In terms of diseases, we see some resistance, certainly not as great. Insects, again, resistance, it's there with certain insects, certain insecticide groups, but minor compared with POA in turf.
Okay.
It's
so it is a big problem.
It is. Yeah. And it's not just Australia, it's everywhere around the world in turf.
Yeah, sure. So what does the next sort of few years hold for Jyri Kaapro then in the turf industry? What's your main focus going to be over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, with this new company, I guess, it's an exciting time to see what they acquire.
Yeah.
And what we can include and start working on. There's been a few digital things and so forth that we've sort of been having a look at, and they might come in. There's certainly a whole sweep of new products that we may start working on. So, it's an exciting time for me. I'm obviously getting towards the end of my career in the turf industry, but I think things are developing so quickly, especially with technology. Robotics and digital technology, drones. Who knows what's going to come in the next few years? It just seems to develop so quickly.
Have you delved much into robotics at the moment? Because we've seen quite a lot of it lately, like robotic weed control, for example, like using NDVI and other digital imaging methods to spot out weeds of turf, and this robot just goes on the ground and spots them out and sprays them out. Have you done much work with that? I find that fascinating.
We haven't done anything here. I know there has been work done in the US, and we've certainly been looking at various things, but it's amazing what's happening with, with burning, with lasers, with electricity, with microwaves. So there's all sorts of weed control technology being looked at, and that is certainly could be a key part of that resistance that we talked about with herbicide, is that these other options in terms of weed control.
It's going to be an exciting few years for sure. I know we were lucky enough to go to the US earlier this year, and we went to some of our people travelling with us went to the World Ag Expo, and it was all about robotics. It really is going to be something special. We've got mowers here now. We play around with a lot of robotic mowers, but I know robotic weed management is going to be a pretty exciting thing for the future. So Jyri Kaapro, it wasn't it was a different name for me. I had to ask you how to pronounce it a couple of times there. So you're obviously, you weren't born in Australia. Whereabouts are you from, and how'd you get to where you're at now?
Yes, I was born in Finland, came out in 1975 at the age of 10. So you can imagine, and that was, I think it was January. So January in Finland is the middle of winter. January in Sydney is the middle of summer. So a bit of a shock in that way.
Yeah.
When we moved to Australia. Arrived in Sydney and grew up in the country in New South Wales.
So why the move?
A long story, Joe, but involved mum falling for an Australian while overseas, and then my parents decided to split up. Things weren't going that well, so Mum and I sort of packed up and moved to the other side of the world.
And you said the weather was a shock to the system. What about the culture and moving here in general? Was that a big change for you at that age?
It was. We were living on a farm outside Goulburn.
Right.
So, and my family's still got a farm there. So, getting on a property from urban life, living in an apartment in Finland, was certainly different, but... great, farm life for a kid, running around, and it was great times.
Moving to Goulburn, you get to experience real farm life pretty quick, don't you? I suppose it's a real rural area. It's a real country Australian town. Goulburn.
Yeah, and back in the 1970s, there was no freeway to Sydney, so it was an all-day trip to. As you pass through every little town on the old Hume Highway to go anywhere. So yeah, you were pretty isolated.
And you got to experience some. I know you'd be used to cold weather in Finland, but Goulburn can get awfully cold too.
And it's funny. I don't like cold weather, so growing up in Finland, people say that's amazing. But and especially that wind, that southerly wind.
Oh yeah,
that blows in Goulburn.
No, I know that for first hand how cold it can get there. And so when you moved here, you went to Goulburn, then you went and studied in Armidale. What cold part of Australia are you found yourself in now?
I didn't think of that, but yes, Goulburn to Armidale wasn't much different. My first year at Armidale, it snowed.
Yeah,
I came back from lectures, and some group of guys had broken into my room and built a snowman on my desk. In my room, being a fresh, as we're called, freshers, first year students. It went from cold to cold. Now I'm living on a couple of acres outside Picton.
Beautiful.
Just sort of southwest of Sydney. Yeah. Not as cold as the other two places, but we still get some cool weather.
So, what keeps you busy outside of work?
Well, we've got the couple of acres there, which certainly keeps us busy. Sure. We're fairly well timbered, so we're a bit fire prone, so there's always clearing up and getting ready for summer to do. Apart from that, I play cricket in the summer.
Yeah.
And I'm fairly passionate about cricket. Yeah. I'm a bit addicted to cricket, so I love that. Very very level cricket, but...
Not Sydney first grade?
No, definitely. But so that sort of takes up Saturdays right through the summer for me.
So cricket's not a big thing in Finland, so that was just a love you got with...
Cricket's definitely not a big thing in Finland. I don't know why. It's just... When I came to Australia, we were working on the farm. The radio was on. Yeah. The Ashes was on, and I didn't really know what was going on. But, I think we got to... It must have been... about 78 or so, and the Aussies were getting hammered by the Poms, but I somehow got fascinated with cricket. We ended up getting a television, and I saw it on TV, and I don't know, something about the game, the history of the game. I just really enjoy it and play with a really good bunch of blokes. We've got a lot of father-sons in the team, three father-sons. My son plays in the team as well.
How good's that? Yeah.
that's when I started playing again when he moved from juniors to seniors.
Yeah.
So we could play together. So, yeah.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, it's good fun.
Well, it's going to be a hot old summer for cricket in Picton, I'd imagine, this summer, but you'd be used to it.
The forecast certainly sounds like it's going to be a bit different the last couple of seasons when we've had more washouts than actually playing cricket. But
you wouldn't be able to go on the field the last 2 years.
No, not much.
Oh, very good. Well, I hope this provided everyone with a totally different look at our industry. It's not all just about harvesting, growing, selling and using turf. There's so much goes on in the background to developing the products that we use every single day, and Jyri and his company are a massive part of that, and the role that they have in providing sustainable turf products that actually work is super, super important. So check out Envu when you get a chance and some of the products that they work with, and I think everyone will really enjoy this listen, Jyri, so we thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers. Opening bowler, opening bat, what do you do?
I stand at first slip and tell everyone else where to go.